get knocked down, but you gotta get up, keep going.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Sovereign CEO podcast. I have with me today Nadine Artemis. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with you.
I was just saying before we hit the record button, I was laying in bed doing emails, which I normally don't do. I usually have better screen habits, but there was a little ping of an email from your team saying, like, oh, I think you might like to talk to Nadine. And I looked over at my bedside table and I pulled up your book. I was like, yeah, I want to talk to Nadine.
That's so fun.
So,
Timing.
and it's funny too. I live in a tiny little town in Ontario. I'm very familiar with your products. We had a really amazing esthetician that had like a ton of your line. So I've
Oh,
experienced like
cool.
a lot of your products, a lot of your work. But this book, Renegade Beauty, that you've written is it's poetry. Like when I read, I love the story about how you started your business. I love how it's written, and it's all about a holistic health. But it's like poetry. It's just these beautiful stories about nature and our connection to it, about sacred geometry. For the people that don't know who Nadine is, can you give us a little bit of a backstory about your business?
Yeah, sure. I'm always like, where do I start?
Mhm.
I definitely, as a child growing up in Canada, I was luckily surrounded by so much nature. And, I would love just like, throwing mud on or mixing muds and crushing geranium petals and then jumping in the lake. I mean, just didn't make too much sense, but I just love that tactile earthiness and just being lost in the woods, that kind of thing. And then I would even make little concoctions and put them in shells. I was always trying to find like natural packaging, which really doesn't work that well. But anyway, and then at home, if I wasn't in the woods, I'd be like getting into trouble by like mixing everything in my mother's bathroom, like with the Chanel #5 perfume with the skull and crossbones stuff underneath the sink to like clean the
Oh.
sink area. This is like I think I'm like grade 3 or something like that. Or I'll go over to my friend's house and like pull out their blender. So definitely wanting to need to mix and to be in nature. And then get to the teen stage and exploring all that fun stuff. And it was the 80s. So it's like, I think every girl like knew how to do a blowout to get to school, right? Or like crimp our hair. And I would get all the hand-me-downs from my mom and sister in the cosmetic realm. So like, I mean, my bathroom was just tons of bottles and I would mix perfumes and, crush eyeshadow into lip balm. Again, not really making anything from scratch, but just like, I just had that urge to make things. And yeah, just sort of having a fun teen time in the 80s. And then the body shop came along and it was seemed like so revolutionary and green. And even though green words started coming in to our vocabulary. But then I'm at university, I'm about 18, and that's sort of when my beauty got more renegade. And I lived in a little like cottage in the backyard of a house kind of thing. And when I would walk home, I would pass by this health food store in a house. It was called Grains and Beans and Things. And I just got like every book and like I was reading all these because I was like starting to prepare my own food. Obviously, you're at university. Although, I mean, we made it home, but I'm just saying, I was like buying groceries, like preparing things and just really questioning a lot of food and ingredients. And I would get books like How to Read Labels at the Supermarket. I can't remember the exact name of that book. I think it's by the Diamonds. Anyway, I found it so fascinating to like dissect a label and like see that all brand like had like basically cardboard fiber, or that white sugar is like just, or sorry, brown sugar is white sugar with molasses, or that a can of soup that says cheese, that cheese might have like, 20 ingredients that aren't listed. So just sort of this whole thing. And again, this was like, like now we're in about 1990. So we don't have like, the internet and blogs and all this education. So I was really fascinated by that. And that just led me to just go, hey, what am I putting on my body? Then I'm reading all the body shop labels with a lot more like, education in my brain. And I just realized it's just like petroleum promised land, and it's just total BS. And there is no cucumber in the cucumber face toner, and the fuzzy peach oil had never been impeached, just like totally
What about
seeing
the
BS.
Satsuma? There must be Satsuma in the bubble bath.
That's right. Yeah. And yeah, so just sort of seeing all that, but then I was so excited because also in that moment I was like, oh my God, now I have an excuse, so to speak, to like make all my own stuff. So, I'd sort of just really, I'm making like sourdough bread, and I would take like these courses in the like a back of a library, and like three people would show up, and then we're like learning how to make like hijiki salad and like milk out of cashews, which was pretty revolutionary back then.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
were ahead of your time. Like in the 90s, we were poison everything. No one like it's normal now to talk about it, but it was not back then.
Yeah, it was pretty like it felt pretty new. I was like meditating, doing yoga, like just that whole thing. And then, but yeah, I started to make my own stuff, and I was so excited because I was like, well, that's BS. And so now I'm gonna make it. So I would, just everything. I just started to make like lip balms and body oils and perfumes. And then I was really making them with a purpose because I had been studying the essential oils, which to me were like this palette of ingredients that, yes, they smell great, which is awesome, but they are so multifaceted, and they're really quite medicinal, for lack of a better word. They are very active, they're medicinal, and even if you cannot smell, they are, working with the cells and the body. They're anti-inflammatory, antifungal, antiviral, so that you can actually make cosmetics that are like a boon, a boost to your immune system, a boost to your cells, and that you could actually make things that would heal a scar, like rather than just whatever, every other kind of
Mhm.
cosmetic is just sort of this really very synthetic at this stage, generally speaking, like 90% or whatever. I mean, you can go in the health food store. I would be hard pressed to find something that I would actually put on my body in the health food store cosmetic aisle. Yeah.
What kind of
So,
things are in, like, I would assume that the things in the health food store would be good for you, organic. What kind of things are red flags for you that you see as skincare?
yeah. Well, I'm pretty hardcore, but like, the from a Tom's of Maine toothpaste to whatever other brands. I mean, Tom's has, been bought out now, and it's pretty commercial, but it was there, and it has sodium lauryl sulfate, for example. Or is the lavender actually real? Or is it a synthetic isolate of the lavender? And then some natural ingredients I don't think we necessarily want to use, like grapeseed oil, almond oil, or apricot kernel oil. They may not be 100% genuine and authentic, but they're also could be rancid. And like grapeseed oil is so extracted with solvents, like we wouldn't even use it
Mm-hmm.
if it wasn't, because it'd be very like sludgy. But
Mm-hmm.
so, and then there's like, is the product going rancid? Organic ingredient, like an organic cosmetic, like organic is still good. I mean, obviously it's all we got, like on one level. So we're like wild crafting or growing our own. For single ingredients, it's still good. Like I feel like, but like if it's a mix, it's like that it's been played with so much in the rules and the regulations. Like you can have an organic feed for your whatever horses, cows, and it's allowed to have like GMO alfalfa in it, for example. So like it's not, the firewall has kind of disassembled. And in cosmetics, it only has to be 80% organic. And then there's a list of about 100 processes and refinements that you could do to a product. Like you can bleach and deodorize organic jojoba and still have that, be an organic product. That other 20%, what can get in there, like methylparabens, but like that 20% could be so toxic. And then the other game that's played is like, well, like a lotion, generally speaking, is about, anywhere from like 30 to 60% water. Like basically a lotion or a cream is like a mayonnaise for your skin, right? It's the water and the oil emulsified. Basically, that's
Mm-hmm.
a cream. So the water component, obviously water is not necessarily organic. Obviously, there's a lot of purity protocols we can have to our water, but what they'll do is make like basically like a chamomile tea or a lavender tea. So they'll use organic chamomile flowers, make a water aqueous extract, and then that first ingredient will be like aqueous extract of chamomile. And it could be 60%, and it's organic because it's an organic tea water base. So
Mm.
that could be like the first ingredient. And then that's the bulk of it. And you've already taken care of maybe 60% of your organic certification. You know what I mean? So there's
Yeah.
so many games, but the single ingredient, you can still get organic. And I forget where I was even going with all that. But yeah, okay. So back to the health food store. If you're in, so just because it's organic skin cream and you think, great, I don't have to like turn around and look at the label and the fine print, I think you still kind of do because there's just can be so much in there.
Mm.
Or there's a lot of things that'll be like, or linalool or limonene, which are synthetic isolate extracts of essential oils, which isn't, yeah. So it's not, so then, and the reason why we don't want to do that is especially now that we understand about our microbiome. So not only is it just toxic, maybe it's affecting our endocrine system and our liver, but it's literally mutating the microbiome of our skin, which
Yep.
is a huge part of our microbiome. Most of us are now aware of the microbiome in our guts.
Mhm.
There's like an ear, nose, throat microbiome, obviously the mouth microbiome, the gut microbiome, and then the skin is a huge microbiome. And obviously it's affected by the guts microbiome, all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. We have way less like activity on like the palms of our hands or the bottoms of our feet compared to like our face or our armpits, or you know what I mean? There can be very active areas, but basically all these ingredients are mutating the microbes, maybe making some species extinct. And what we can also understand microscopically now is that even using like a mild foaming cleanser, the surfactants, the synthetic surfactants, will lodge themselves into the stratum corneum, that very fine top layer of the skin, and they don't go away with rinsing. So we're getting like a buildup of like microscopic residue on our skin, that isn't working with, and as gross as it sounds, we actually want good bacteria on our skin, and
Yep.
we want to kind of step back and get out of the way and allow like bacteria to be our beautician. And those microbes, they need a little bit of sebum. They need some dead skin cells. And I know that sounds very gross, but there's a whole system there that we can't just override with our Clinique alcohol face toners and our benzoyl peroxide.
Yep.
Because when we use those things, then the body's also going, oh, like there's a bit of an emergency there, So then like it responds to that area and it tries to balance out. And then we get in a really kind of vicious cycle of like, eroding the lipid barrier, eroding the stratum corneum, over exfoliating, over scrubbing, and then making young skin cells come up to do the top job way too early. And then we're leaving our skin very vulnerable.
Mhm.
And it's a part of our innate immune system. So we've got to
Let's
like,
let's talk about that. Like, because the
ah,
you kind of blew my mind on the microbiome issue. I wasn't actually aware of that. I listen to Zach Bush all the time talk about the microbiome in agriculture and how you don't actually want to be constantly tilling the soil. You kind of want to leave those
mm,
structures in place. And I never even thought about my skin as having these structures that don't want to be disturbed. When I was listening to you talk about scrubbing, I was like, "Oh no." But I've always had the hardest skin, and I'm sure you hear this all the time. Acne,
mm,
like
looks
really bad
great.
acne. It might be the Zoom filter, but I scrub all the time, and all the like I know it's bad, but like my skin seems to need, and this must be a false belief, like the constant scrubbing, the like harsh cleaners because I am oily. I see stuff get stuck.
Yeah, well, you do get a bit oilier when you've over scrubbed because that lipid barrier is trying to balance. What are
Mm.
you scrubbing with, if I may ask?
Usually a natural scrub. Sometimes I use the face cloth
Yeah,
and
the face can be enough. So if you do the face cloth with oil, I mean, that is like, that would be great. It just, all you really need is the best skin ever. And then what you could do
yep.
sometimes is add a pinch of baking soda and then like to that cloth. So you get the cloth, wet it, squirt of oil, pinch of baking soda, and you'll get a nice little, very smooth exfoliation that won't disrupt your system.
because I keep trying to do, and so Clean Face is the only oil that I've used that hasn't made me break out because I keep trying to break these cycles. And
Mm,
I'm like, I'm gonna wash my face with the oil and I'm gonna do it the right way and I'm only gonna wash once a day. And then I get huge breakouts. And then I know that's the part of like the detox, but every time that happens, I get scared and I stop. So I'm like,
yeah,
oh, it's gonna get worse.
yeah, it's interesting because that is rare. Like, so a
Mm,
lot of people can just switch and get off whatever they were using, use the best skin ever, or just like literally jojoba or a real, true, beautiful olive oil. Like, you don't have to buy what I'm making, but like, definitely, if you just had a real bottle of organic olive oil or organic jojoba, you'd be good for like years with just that one bottle. But my point is, yes, but it's so rare. So what you're going through, I feel like is about 5% of the people. Unfortunately, you're in there. And yeah, there is this moment where you have to just get over, like I don't mean get over it, but like it could take 2 or 3 weeks. So, but let's talk after. Let me come up with a.
I will. But one thing that like was encouraging me to like revisit this was when you were talking about the cascade of other skin effects that might happen. And you said
Ah,
melasma. And I was like, oh no, that's happening now too, all these spots. And I thought it was because of my
mm.
hormones, because of the sun. And I was like, oh, maybe it's because I'm disrupting again the layers, the microbiome, and just not letting the skin do its thing.
Yeah, it could be that. And then some of the doodads can really help with the melasma and make it fade. Like
Mm,
we've had people, generally anywhere from 60 to 100% full fade on the hyperpigmentation slash melasma.
whoa.
Now, I know you are, I'm sure, not eating like canola and seed oils and on birth control. Good,
No,
just
ma'am.
guessing. Anyway, and I'm mentioning those because those are such hyperpigmentation creators.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just eating a normal diet, you probably do have about 20% of those polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's like the canola, mazola. Like if you're just sort of eating regular and buying processed food, then the diet can be about 20% of those not good oils that have been bleached, deodorized, winterized. They're essentially just rancid and not, I mean, it's just not a good fat.
Mm-hmm.
But so much hyperpigmentation comes from that. It's pretty
Yes.
incredible. And I do have a section on that in Renegade Beauty. I think it's in the sun chapter, just like, really helping people see what the sun's doing and what it isn't doing, what
Yeah.
we're blaming the sun for that could be something else. Because we do need sunshine,
Yep.
and it's important for the microbiome. It's important, like, and we do, obviously there's a huge trend with the red light masks, and those are, if it's a good quality one, it's good. My point is though, we're supposed to be out in the sun with the red light. So it's like, and the people are getting like lasers and light thing, but literally we have this beautiful ball of light and you just have to know how to use it.
Yes.
So it doesn't, the violet rays don't come in now where is all different. So I like, there's a circadian app, and I also use a D minder app to
Mm-hmm.
just, so I'm always knowing what's going on with the sun in my like longitude, latitude, my geographical location. So like right now, I mean, whoa, today or tomorrow is our last day of vitamin D in Ontario.
I know.
Yeah.
Dark at 4 p.m. now.
Oh my gosh. Um, so let's talk about like the summer. So July, the vitamin D is probably, I think it's coming in around 8:30. Anyway, so you have this window in the morning until that, and that's like all red light, infrared light, and that's a really awesome time of day to be outside. You don't have to be sunbathing at that point. You can literally just be walking your dog and be clothed because the infrared's getting through, and that's boosting your immune system. And then it's giving you a lot of circadian messages that we need because that's how generally we were starting the day. And
Mm-hmm.
even though we've advanced all kinds of things, our biology is still circadian is king. And basically all modern living is like trying to counter that circadian rhythm, which we just can't. Like we can, but there will be consequences and it may just come slowly. So red light, get out there, get in the morning. So also no, so that's always safe. You will never, That's not the violet. Now, I still believe the violet is good, but just know that. So if you're out with your baby, whatever, like really know where you are. Because even in the winter in like Costa Rica, for example, I don't think that vitamin D is even coming till about 9:30. So you know what I mean? There's a good window. And then obviously it's mild in that first bit, like it's going to get stronger and stronger. Um, so you want to be able to like slowly but surely like get your skin accustomed to the sun. So, you know, you would go out in the UV time and then just get used to it. For some, that may be five to 10 minutes because, and it's not sunny every day, but you want to build it up. Personally, I mean, in the summer, if I've got time, yeah, I'll be out there almost like sometimes on a really good day, like just basically from sunrise at 5:30 in the morning till about 1 o'clock. Like if I can, obviously that's a very special day, like a Sunday, but I'll just do that whole thing. Or I'll come back and work and then go out. But I usually actually try and go out around noon because then I don't have to be out as long and I'm getting a lot of vitamin D. But generally, especially in Canada, we need more than half an hour to
Yeah.
really get what we need. And when you're using it that way, you're not creating the sun damage. You're literally giving your cells what they need. And, you know, I go more into it in Renegade Beauty with like scientific studies that just show that the more you're exposed to like fluorescent lighting and if you're not going in the sun, that is the path to melanoma. And some of these studies from the New England Journal of Medicine and stuff, that's like from the 90s. There's even more studies out now where they literally found that like it's working by fluorescent light. That was before every person was like in front of a computer screen all day. You know, so it's like the sun isn't causing that kind of damage. Yes, repeated burns in an area, that's not going to be a good thing. We're not talking about that. So you want to be able to use the sun because being in that is you're getting 12 different types of healthy cholesterol, a type of cholesterol sulfate, a type of cholesterol called lumisterol, which is all about the light, and ones can't remember the name of. You're activating amino acids, antimicrobial peptides, catholicitins, and like those. That's just what we know, and we're going to find out more and more as the years go on. And our skin and our body is just there's thousands of vitamin D receptors all over, and it needs to be brimming with sunshine. And that alchemy that's created because the vitamin D, which is such a weird name because it's kind of like a hormonal precursor. It isn't really even a vitamin. That sun on skin contact creates a water soluble form of vitamin D that we can't get anywhere else. And when we supplement, which is necessary for some people, including like me in the winter, because I can't, it's been a very sunny October, but I still can't like keep my D just elevated from the sun. So that's a fat soluble vitamin when we're taking it internally. So there is just this union and this design with our bodies and the sun that we want to tap into to really deeply revive ourselves and our being in a way that really, you know, no meditation, vitamin, or skincare cream is going to accomplish.
It's we just did a podcast this week too with Rachel Maurice, who's she's a former MD, and now she focuses primarily on light and circadian rhythm as a way to
Amazing.
heal
Oh,
people.
wow.
Like
That's
resets your metabolism, boosts your mitochondria, really fixes everything that the body needs itself to do.
yeah, yeah. And that's always like, as you know, even writing Renegade Beauty or formulating a product, I first try and understand like what's going on with the body before we weren't born with a toothbrush in our hands. So like what is going on in the body to prevent cavities, without effort? Like
Mm,
what's the system in place? And then how are we hampering that? Are we helping it? Could we add something in that will, work with that system rather than going against the biology? Because like,
mm-hmm.
can't can't master that design.
No.
So,
Let's talk about holistic dental care and what people are doing that is harmful for their teeth, what they actually need to be doing. Because I'm assuming the mouth has its own microbiome. What's going on with the teeth, with the gums, maybe that we don't know.
yeah, so yeah, there's a whole oral microbiome, and generally, like I was saying with skin, our modern mouth medicants have definitely been mutating the mouse microbiome and really just like throwing off the homeostasis of the mouse like system and the oasis of like the saliva that's supposed to come in and be slightly alkaline, and then it glides over the teeth looking for areas that are weak in the enamel and to help that, so there's a whole system there again. And then we're coming in with our triclosan and our crest and sodium sulfate and like making gums bleed and recede quicker, or mercury fillings, which are just affecting the whole microbiome.
And
So yeah,
triclosan, is that what you
triclosan.
said?
Yeah,
Did
it
I
is
hear that's
a
an ingredient that they removed out of hand soap because they said it was too dangerous, but they kept in toothpaste?
yes.
That's
So
wild.
it's so wild. It's kind of like an antibiotic, but it's a little bit of a different class. I can't remember. And it basically wreaks havoc on aquatic ecosystems, which like I kind of think we're an aquatic ecosystem a little
Mhm.
bit, with like a lot of water in us. And they banned it from like Purell kind of hand sanitizy soapy things because it would mutate the hands microbiome, lower the immune system, and then create a breeding ground for superbugs.
Whoa.
Yeah,
But
because
you
we
could
mess with that
swallow
microbiome.
it.
And yeah, but let's keep it in the toothpaste because that makes a lot of sense.
That's wild. And then how do those things encourage things like gum recession?
Well, some of the ingredients could just be because it's so harsh of a surfactant, and then also I think we're not brushing correctly. We're doing, I don't know if you've seen grease, which is like totally aging myself. I saw that when I was like in grade 5, I think. But anyway, there's the brusha.
Yep.
One or the other two. Don't do that. Don't do brusha. You want to do one way. So gum to tooth. So on the top, it's gum, down, and on the bottom, you're up. Now it's gonna take some moment because you're used to up and down, but you can get quite quick, but you're just up.
Yep.
So doing that, because if you're doing the other way, it's kind of like sweeping microscopic debris under the rug of your gum. And
Right.
then then you're inserting that like the ingredients from the triclosan and the sodium sulfate, and there's that feeling of like scrubbing again, like you're like, I'll scrub that all off my teeth, which yes, the teeth can be pretty scrubbed, but the gums, which are connected, cannot be scrubbed.
Right.
So, and that join, it's where the gum and tooth join is so precious. Like we've got to keep that intact. That's called the sulca, or also like they'll refer to, if you go to the dentist, like a gum pocket. And then
Hmm.
maybe they've been like, oh, that gum pocket's like a 6, 7, 8, 9, not a good thing. And then they might be suggested for like a gum graft because the gum's receding. And if the enamel gets exposed under the gum, it's like a different type of enamel. It's like not as strong. And then you can get those gum line cavities, then the bone loss, blah, blah, blah. It's like a whole thing. So
Can
got
you
to keep
reverse
yeah,
that holistically?
yeah, you really can. So whatever state your mouth is in, because I feel like growing up, I always felt like, if you got a cavity, it's just like, boom, like it was just like it's set. But of course, our mouth is connected to our body and it's alive. So, and the gums, they're thin. It's the epithelium skin, it's called. It's one cell thick. So they can bleed quite easily, but they can also heal pretty fast given the right environment. Your bones are remineralizing all day long if we're giving them the right ingredients. And then saliva is quick to turn around. So really, even though I may be saying things that are, not exciting to hear, wherever your mouth is at, it really can evolve and get better. And I created
Yeah.
like back in 2010 these like 8 steps that you can follow. They're very simple and they can really like, I feel like kind of pull up your socks, so to speak, like for your oral care. And if you haven't been to the dentist for a while, or whatever your story is, just do
Hmm.
the steps for like 2 to 3 months before you go to the dentist, and you will really, turn things around. And it also requires us to have a little bit more knowledge, a little more
Hmm.
sovereignty around our mouth, understanding, taking a curiosity. What is that? Oh, that too sensitive. Oh, I see the gums kind of maybe up there. So seeing what maybe the weak spots in your mouth are, and then, that we were out of stock right now, but we would even sell like little dental mirrors so that you could just like, what is going back on there? So it's not just this giving up of your body authority to the dentist, the doctor, like
Yep.
once a year. You don't know what's going on. Generally, a lot of those appointments aren't giving you the full informativeness, informed consent, whatever, because there's just things that happen. They don't think, or the system hasn't thought, hey, maybe she or he would like to know that. You know what I mean? So we have to know a bit more.
Fine.
And ideally, you're working with a dentist that's like right there with you, happy to answer your, 100 crazy questions or whatever. Because they're really like a partner in your health. And it's not just this authoritative, like, hey, I know what's best for you. So, I mean, why work uphill when there's just, I feel like every year there's just more dentists that are really getting their game on and
Yeah.
offering good services. Yeah.
Well, you said this isn't exciting. I think this is really exciting. The idea that like you could heal these conditions and like a cavity, like why wouldn't you be able to heal a cavity if you can break a bone and a bone can heal itself?
Exactly.
I have
A
such
cavity is really like
anxiety.
a tooth infection.
Yes.
And it's saying, hey, I need other things.
Yep.
Like usually it's the root is coming from, well, this is really cool. So so I learned this. So I'm not a dentist, obviously, and I'm just learning. I'm like, who are so I went into it, like in the 2000s, especially after I had Leaf, because, there are things after you have a child, they're just like, your teeth they take a lot of toll because you're giving, right, all the stuff from
Yep.
your bones into their sweet bodies. So I really wanted to go into it. And I really even started earlier than that, like when I was, at that health food store, at the Grains and Beans and things. I kept looking for more answers for the dental because I found that was one area. Like I found so many other things, right? Like, how to take care of like eczema, headaches, like just all those little kind of symptoms that people get that I find you can really create so much at home to really take care of, varicose veins or like a headache or indigestion, eczema, all that kind of stuff's very solvable. But I wasn't finding anything on dentistry. And I would go to like a quote unquote holistic dentist in Toronto, but they were still like, doing root canals and giving you crest. But the hygienist was very holistic. And I was like about 24 and I had the beginning of a cavity. And she was like, well, just go home and, make something with all your things, like the herbs that you work with. And she's like, and then we'll check it in 6 months. And I was like, I didn't even know that was like a possibility,
No
and
one
then
knows
later,
that. Yeah.
and I
Nobody knows
started
that.
researching, all these, like not all these dentists, but other dentists that literally are saying that, right? 60s, 70s, the 80s, like you can find a kind of a book in each generation. Anyway, I went home and I did make what did become the Happy Gum Drops dental serum,
Yep.
which was really kind of the first dental serum. I think there's some imitations now, but it's just this great vulnerary, which means it speeds up healing. We've got beautiful oils in there that historically have been used for oral care for thousands of years. And then now under sort of that modern scientific microscope, we can see that things like clove, tea tree, cinnamon, rosato, frankincense, neem, mastic, cardamom, and more, but those are a lot of ingredients I'm using in dental care. But now we can see that those essential oils are exactly what we need right now because they are quorum sensing inhibitors, QSI for short, which means the essential oils can go in like clove and it can prevent the pathogenic bacteria from acting up and creating gene expression and then biofilm. So basically, once they get traction, they can kind of gang up, form a group, form a biofilm, but the clove can go in there and bust it up. Whereas sometimes an antibiotic could do that, but the antibiotics are antibiotic, anti-life. Antibiotics are they have their place, but we're way overused, and they're these indiscriminate sort of assassins that come in and decimate the microbiome in that area. It's kind of like just, farming with glyphosate. And so it kills everything, but we now know we need like most of our bodies being this beneficial bacteria. And if the beneficial bacteria is happy, it will keep those pathogens in check. So then the extra cool thing about all these essences is that they do have this quorum sensing inhibition ability, but they are also, so they're able to work with pathogenic bacteria, but they work with the friendly bacteria. They don't decimate it. So it's like literally what we need right now. Something like hydrogen peroxide can do that too. It's going to clean up pathogens, but be okay with the beneficial bacteria. And this also is even applied in agriculture, especially in Europe. So like chicken feed, obviously a lot of biotics used in agriculture or animal agriculture, whatever the term is. And so what they started doing in Europe in some places is putting like very antibiotics, so to speak, essential oils, not really antibiotic, but like not clove there, it was rosemary and oregano. And they're putting it in the chicken feed, and then that's replacing the use of antibiotics because now they're getting that antifungal, antiviral things that they were kind of getting from the antibiotics, but now they're not like decimating the little chicken bellies.
Right.
So the essential oils, again, they smell so pretty, they can kind of be deceiving because they're just like they're gorgeous. So that it feels like, you know, that's just all they're supposed to do is sort of just be pretty, you know, but
Yeah.
they're like these real workhorses that can get in there. And when you're applying like the gum serum, then, you know, you're giving the chance for that gum tissue to be rehealed. You're helping the pocket like clear out, you know, antibacterial stuff that kind of got under there, pushing back the gums. And then we also have things like this blunt tipped syringe that you can, it's kind of like a very tiny flosser, like a Vitapic, or what are those called? Like a, you
Yeah.
know, shoots out water, whatever that's called.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Water pick.
yeah, water pick. So, but so in there you could do like a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. You could add in the dental serum. You could make like kind of a salty baking soda water because that's all very alkalizing and cleansing. And then you can just get it just under those receding gum pockets in between the teeth, and then really get it cleaned out so that it has a chance to rejuvenate itself. Or you can take that dental serum, slide it along the floss. Then you're getting all that juicy, you know, botanical biotic messaging up into those tiny spaces in between the teeth that may have been bleeding when you did floss. So then maybe you weren't flossing. So generally people find if they apply the yogi serum or the dental, you know, one of the dental serums along the floss, and they did have bleeding gums, when they floss, that it would clear up within like a day or two of just doing that
Wow.
new.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
be your guinea pig. I'm gonna take a before and after. I'm gonna share it to your
Awesome.
Instagram. I do have receding gums and just in two teeth. And the dentist is never good news. It's always, hey, this
Yeah.
is going to cost a lot of money and it's going to hurt and it's probably not going to last. So whatever I can do to avoid the dentist,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
here for it. Now, because these things are so powerful, the essential oils are as strong as like a medicinal product. I assume then we also shouldn't be so willy-nilly with how we apply it. We should actually know like what they're meant to do. Like even just the mouth, for example, can people put any oil in, or are there actually some oils that are not helpful to the microbiome and we have to be careful which ones we apply?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, generally it would all be okay, but like even clove and cinnamon need to be they like clove, cinnamon, oregano are hot, and always dilute those babies. So you know what I mean? Do not put like just clove on your teeth because you'll just burn your gums.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, I mean, you know, I'm talking about essential oils. Obviously, I've been working with my own distillers for like 30, like since 1992. So I talk about them freely, but like there are a lot of essential oils that just aren't even real or genuine or authentic. So
Mm-hmm.
first, just obviously be using the real thing. We have also third-party lab testing that we put with every oil, you know, so you can just know, because otherwise it's not what it is, and we only want to be
Right.
working with what it is. So there's that. Now, there's some oils like maybe peppermint or frankincense that you could like rub along the gum, but you'd have to know it. How do you work with it? Because anything that's in the mouth, again, it's that thin skin, should be diluted before you're using it. But like a drop of peppermint in your mouth is a great way to freshen the breath, for example, and normally fine with most people. But just, you know, do little tests with yourself. And generally, yeah, when we're talking about essential oils, we're talking about the drop, like one drop of rose, which is if it's Rosado, it's the steam distilled, gorgeous, you know, distilled in the Bulgarian Valley of Roses. One drop contains 60 heads of roses. So
Wow.
potent, really potent. Do you mind if I just get my dog? She just
Yeah,
got
yeah,
back and
yeah.
she's barking. Okay.
No problem.
She would have just barked. She doesn't know I'm on a podcast.
Same. I have to keep my door open. I have a little blind bulldog, and if the door is closed and he happens to want to come in, then he will just whine and whine.
Hey.
So I love how passionate you are about this, and this is so needed with how poisoned we are from so many different angles. And what I love about your story too is that this started when you were just a little kid. One of my favorite books is called The Great Work of Your Life, and it talks about there being clues to your purpose,
Yes.
to the work that you're
Yes.
supposed to do. So they talk about like Jane Goodall. When she was 2 years old, she would hide in the chicken coop, and her mom would panic because she couldn't find Jane anywhere. Meanwhile, she was hiding in the chicken coop for like 6 hours, waiting for the egg to come out because she wanted to like watch that process.
Aw.
And her family just nurtured her. So what the book talks about is we have clues as to the kind of work that we're meant to do. We all have a unique purpose. And if you nurture that, it'll turn into something miraculous. And if you suppress that or you ignore that, it really just leads to disease in a different way, right? We're just unhappy, unsatisfied, unfulfilled, which is what I really love about your story. Like as a little kid, you were running off into the woods and finding these things and making potions. How has that continued to evolve in your life? Like it seemed like right from day one, there was like this very clear trajectory.
I think, well, in hindsight, it's always a bit clearer. However, I do really feel like there's so many breadcrumbs sort of along the way. And you'll just like, there's just like
Mm,
hundreds of tiny moments that would have been so insignificant. And I could just see how they impacted my life just so greatly, whether it
mm,
was having like a little dollhouse that I took care of. And then because we lived, we had a little cottage. And then I had like a cabin dollhouse, like a human dollhouse, and just taking care of that. And then like, I could just tell how like when now I have like many little doll, like cabins, or like I needed little cabins, for example. That's a silly example, but I just even saw like, or I went to like a perfume museum when we went to Europe the summer of grade 8, or like, and I was seeing the history of it, or like my great grandfather would do illustrations in Egypt, like in the late 1800s. He would go on archaeological digs as a bit of an archaeologist, but also as this illustrator, and he would draw these pictures of blue lotus. And then when this book on how to make cosmetics fell out of the library in grade 9, when I was researching like what kind of science fair project I was going to do, it like totally went into the history of perfumes, which I didn't
huh,
know from the hundreds of like synthetic bottles on my bathroom counter of like, the Christian Dior Poison or the Magie Noir by like all of that. It like gave some context, but like totally different creatures. But I was like, oh, like that's the roots of perfume and Egypt. And then thinking about my great grandfather and the illustrations that I would always look at, and then just seeing that perfumes actually, were like pressed from petals and tinctured from trees. And I was like, oh my God, like it just brought so much more excitement to the world of perfume. But then it said that they were distilled and they would be called essential oils, and you would find them at a health food store. So I was like, oh my God. And then my
mm,
mom, she drove me to Toronto, and that's where I got my first whiff of some essential oils. They were Oracacia. I totally remember. It was like, it used to be the only brand around. And that's where I was smelling like, jasmine or orange and ylang for the first time. And even though it was sort of this 80s scentscape that we were all living in of like watermelon and strawberry chewing gum and like Glade air fresheners were just coming into the
mm.
scene.
Lip
But
smackers.
those, yeah, totally. And then, but I smelt these oils, and I didn't have a clue of like the language between natural and synthetic, but it really spoke to me. And then that's what I did for my science fair project. I got those essential oils, and then I remade Nina Ricci's L'air de Temps using essential oils for the science fair project. So that
Wow.
was fun. That was my first essential oil moment. That's like really when I was like, oh, like that was that
Yeah.
moment. Yeah. But then I kind of like, then they kind of faded for a moment. And then it was like, and then I'm back at 18 going, wait, the body shop's BS. Like, what am I going to make things with? And
Yeah.
then I would read about oils, and I couldn't get them. couldn't get, like Orachatio only had that little set. And so then I was like writing to distillers and all around the world, and then I would get in samples. This is while I was going to university, and then they were blowing my mind. And it
Yeah.
would just be, it could even be just be like tea tree, lavender, bergamot, but they were like, it was like, like a fine wine distance. You've been having the box wine, and you're like, oh my God, there's like a whole other world of like nuance and subtlety. So then I even started importing into Canada because like I couldn't find them anywhere. And then, making my formulas. And then within 6 months of graduating from university, I opened up North America's sort of first full concept aromatherapy store on Queen Street in Toronto. And that was in 1992.
Wow. Now, part of your education as well was in women's studies. So not only
Yeah.
understanding how women's bodies work and this different appreciation of them, you were also learning about cultural issues of the time. I'm really curious your experience going into women's studies then. Would you call yourself a feminist? And how do you feel about because that movement itself has clearly morphed into something else. It seemed like your experience at the time, just from reading Renegade Beauty, it seemed like something totally different and something beautiful. I'm just curious about your thoughts of that movement then and now.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't thought about too much of maybe where I'd gone the movement, so to speak, until the last few years. And then I realized like there is no more women's studies. It's gender studies,
Hmm.
for example. I found it really exciting because the first year I was just sort of in normal classes, and I was like, sometimes you're in those huge classes. But then I signed up for like Russian Lit, and there was like 6 people, which was fun until you want to skip every class. And it's
Yeah.
very obvious you're not there. So I felt like that first year I was very, but that was good because I was actually skipping school, and then I was watching TV, and I watched Phil Donahue, and he had this whole show on like pesticides and eating organic, and that was with Lisa Bonet, and that was actually totally revolutionary for me to like, oh, like, because again, that was all new information that like the environment is affecting like food production and agriculture. So there was a lot of self-directed learning, which I think is sort of innate in me. But then I was happy. So then I got into like the next year, the women's studies courses. And what I loved about that is they were all interdisciplinary. So I could do like film or English, and then we just have a slant. Like, we would look at like, and then we take other classes too of like women in Africa or women in like ancient China. And then I did a whole paper on Taoism and even the Taoism and the whole sexual thing. And then I did like a thesis on like the female orgasm. I wrote film papers on like Madonna and her like masquerading. Like I just had a lot of fun exploring things that I did a project on midwifery. I did a whole essay on like the dangers of the birth control pill.
Hmm.
So I found it very good because I was able to like literally relate it sort of physically to my life. And then it was really good because I felt like I was really understanding the history, sort of transcultural, historical view of women in the Western world and in sometimes other cultures, and just seeing like the devastation to our bodies, like really all human bodies, but just like, the kind of like weird experiments on women's bodies. And so, I'm doing all that, and I'm thinking about beauty and eating. And to me, all things swirl together where we could really, for both men and women, but also I feel like parts of women's health history, like sort of women through, the past 100, 200 years where, I mean, everybody's been experimenting on something, but you know what I mean? Like looking at like the birth control pill, thalidomide, or like when women were giving birth in the 50s and 60s, they were given a pill to dry up their breast milk.
Yeah.
Things like that, or like the dangers of IUD, or like, to me, I just found that so fascinating, so relevant, instead of like, writing another paper about Rasputin and Russian Lit, So I
It's
love
that
that.
we weren't informed. Like there's so throughout history, women have not been fully informed about so
Exactly.
many things. Now, don't worry, this will not get very controversial here, but for example, I listened to a podcast recently about the incomplete stories around post-abortion and the health consequences. Now, I'm a pro-life person, but this podcast was blowing my mind. It was things that I had
Mm.
never heard, and I am for choice, but I was listening to that podcast and I was like, oh, people aren't informed about these post health consequences at all. I've never heard of these things. And it's just another layer to this, like, oh, we don't
Yeah,
really know.
so much of our medical and dental experience is just not informed at
Yep.
all. And then sometimes there is the knowledge that they could inform you, and then sometimes it's because we literally have not informed ourselves before we take, like, I mean, as a industry, like, not really that
Yeah.
we, not you and I per se, but like, does the drug work? Is like thalidomide, is there going to be side effects?
Yes.
Was that checked into? Not even. So they couldn't even, they don't even have anything to inform you with because they didn't even know the outcome themselves, is sort of my point there,
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. It was so, and it felt very, and it felt like obviously there was, feminism in those courses, but it was seemed so like diverse and like everything was allowed and all thoughts were allowed. And it just
Mhm.
felt really like, they seemed like more dynamic professors that were just a little more engaged. So it seemed really fun and good, but it has changed and there is no more women's
Mm.
studies because, well, it's
I
a
think
whole
you
other story.
highlighted something really interesting there. All thought and exploration was allowed. It was a space to be curious. That is
Yeah.
not what I see now in a lot of the cultural movements. It's that there's like a pure doctrine, and it's like no
Yes.
questions asked. This is the new way, and like get on board, or else there's going to be like
Yeah.
punishment. That's
Well,
very
then very different. And also, I think it's about 10 years ago, and I was kind of like, hey, why is like society becoming like the inside of like my women's studies class? Because like we would just, there was things discussed, but it seemed okay, like even, looking at Judith Butler, gender spectrums, like things that are discussed now, or even like around politically correct language, we'll just say. But it was very like, I don't know, kind of navel gazing and that intellectual stuff that you do in university where you can just sort of like theorize and intellectualize. And then about
Mhm.
10 years ago, I was like, what, how is this a part of society? Like, how are people going to actually have the language of like a women's studies class in 1995? You know what I mean? I was like, what is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense. And that it
And
would be forced, and
yes.
that and then also back then it seemed really rebellious to be a part of that or in a class writing a thesis on like the dangers of the birth control pill. It seemed very renegade.
Yes.
And then also, Tanya, I'm like, wait, why is this all being like coming from like the state? You know what I mean? Like, how is this being directed? This like, cultural
Mhm.
women's studies class that we're all in right now.
I
So
mean,
that's
more
when I was
and
like,
more, I find myself chasing the trad wife life all the time.
yes.
And when I got married young, I got married at 21. And I remember thinking, like, I'm a feminist. I'm not making you a sandwich. Like, make your own lunch. Like, I was so resistant to being this supportive partner. I was like, this is me and this is you. And like, we like take care of ourselves. And as I matured and grew up, what I actually started to see was how deeply rooted he was in his masculinity. And he's a man's man. Like he's a carpenter, he's a hunter, he builds things, he kills things. And I don't know why it took me so long, and maybe just cultural brainwashing. I had this aha one day where I was like, "Oh, he's doing everything in his masculine role as a part of this like yin yang to support me, take care of me. Why wouldn't I settle into that counterpart of the yin yang and be the supportive?" Like the day that I got that, I like started like cleaning his home and taking better care of his kids and lovingly
Mm.
preparing his food, and more just sinking into, like, I jokingly call it like the pink rolls and the blue rolls. And I am so happy not resisting my feminine, my I'll say my traditional feminine role. And of course, like all people have different levels of feminine and masculine, but I am so much happier embracing that role. And I almost feel like lied to. I'm like, this is actually way better Way better.
But it's interesting because when we're in that kind of resistance, then we're caught up always in the opposite of what that is, so it's just like a dynamic that isn't necessarily needed.
Yeah.
But even back to those women's studies classes, like if you trad wife, that was totally allowed. Like, every
Mm.
facet of being feminine was completely cool, you
Yeah.
know? So it did
That's
change.
different now.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm definitely into like, just not being part of any ism,
Same.
but I feel like whatever this, like, are we in the fifth wave of feminism or something now? It's definitely changed. We did need to raise some things up. Like, I think it was in the 70s, women couldn't own a mortgage or a credit card.
Yeah.
So we had to,
But you know what? I heard something interesting
Mhm.
about that too. Like, obviously that needed to change, but it wasn't that far off when all men were able to vote either. Prior to that, men needed to be property owners before they could vote. So I learned
Oh,
that
that's
recently too,
interesting.
and I was like, "Oh, that's a big shift that I didn't really understand either."
That's a real class division in the
Hmm.
voting. That's interesting.
Hmm. I just love like the layers of the onion of learning and unlearning again and again. One
Yeah.
thing that I thought was kind of neat, maybe like a foreshadowing too, one of the books that you had highlighted as being like an important text to you was Naomi Wolf back in
Yeah.
school. And I thought that was really neat because I love her in this community as just like a truth seeker on so many levels. Still a liberal, still on that side, but like just a truth seeker. And I thought that was really neat that that was one of your textbooks back then. And she's just such a powerful voice in the freedom sovereignty movement now.
Oh yeah, it was incredible. Yeah, so just the beauty myth came out at that time. I'm sure I wrote some essays on that, quoted her in my stuff. And then yeah, and then later she wrote Vagina, like much later, like I was living here. So that's like a lot later, like 20 years later.
Mm.
But that was a fascinating book, really beautiful book. Yeah, and then she's written some other ones lately, and she's a great voice.
Has there been anything that has knocked you off of your path? Like your path seemed just so neatly laid out. Has there been anything along the way where you're like, whoops, that was a diversion, almost got knocked off?
Well, there's things, but I always feel like, yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like you really can be knocked off a path because you make the path together. The path meets you and you meet the path and you keep going. But yeah, I mean, lots of moments like when everything burnt down, like our whole home, our whole business in 2013 to the
No.
ground. So that was kind of, and then that felt like it was just and there was like, it felt like such a setback. I mean, we literally like every drop of oil, it was August. We had just spent all of July really getting in gear for that. Like, the fall's a very busy season. And one of my right-hand people was going away for August. So we were just sure to really make everything, and we make everything by hand. And, we're always got tons of oils in stock, and June's a big buying month, like where you're buying like maybe 10 liters of Rosado. They're like $20,000 each, give or take a couple dollars, like. And then my mom had died a few months prior, so I had all of her really good heirlooms, like from my great grandfather, that artist, like the guy who in the 1800s was like, hanging out with Howard Carter and digging things. His art was all gone. So that was really not very fun, but it really felt, it feels like a setback, especially in that moment. But once you get kind of everything back together, it takes a couple of years, but it almost felt like um, it propelled us forward. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of
Well, it was a
crazy.
chance to start fresh. Was there anything where you were like, okay, well, we're starting fresh. Now's our chance to do this differently. Was there anything that you changed in rebuilding?
You know, wouldn't say like a pivot, but it's definitely like a time too where I was like, I had to delegate a whole bunch more because I had to like, I mean, we literally had nothing. And yet, like, so that was Saturday to Sunday night, the flames and all that. And then by Monday, we had like somebody say, hey, here's a building. The team went there. It's like nobody lost a day of work. We kept going. We emailed our beautiful clients and said, hey, we set a fire, but like we're really aiming within a month to start sending things out again. So please order as you would. And then luckily people ordered. So like there really was like no stop in the business, even though we didn't have any business and we have such crazy inventory, like 500 raw materials that make up of like 300 different SKUs. Like it's crazy. Um, but I just feel like, if it's the hard part, it's the story's just not over. You're just not at the
Mhm.
ending yet. And you just got to keep going. So yeah, I just always, I'll definitely look for the silver lining in everything.
Mhm.
It's just what I'm going to do. But it does take a moment, like in the first few days after the fire to find that silver lining, but you just keep going.
Mm. And what does the future look like for you, for your business? Where do you see this going in the next few years, especially with things being as crazy as they are out there? Is anything changing for you? Do you have plans to change your business model or how you're working or something new that you want to create?
Yeah, those are great questions. Well, I feel like creating new things and new products all the time. It's a little bit crazy, but we just keep doing it because I have 50 products in my head right now that I would like to make. So that's just ongoing. But the cool thing about the fire is we were also about to build, because it was obviously a home business. We'd moved out of the home and then had these little cabins. And then our house was taken over by our business every day. However, we were building our headquarters. So we'd saved up for a couple years. We did you got to zone the land, do the architect, get the road in, and then we've been saving and saving for a few years. And then luckily we had that savings because we were literally on the Monday after the fire was supposed to be starting the build of our headquarters, which was going to be about 10,000 square feet. And then luckily we had that savings because that was very helpful. And then we were like, what are we gonna, we weren't building anyway. We did our stuff together. It took a few years. And then we realized to build in a whole other spot on the land with like a whole other entrance. So we have about 200 acres here. So we rezoned another part of the land. We redid the architectural drawings because we immediately on that Monday already had a bigger space to work in. We were actually already out of the house. You know what I mean? We didn't
Yeah.
have to build a whole building.
Oh,
So
God was
there
helping
was,
you. He's like,
yes,
let's push you
exactly.
into this.
Yeah, I'll just burn everything in the meantime. But then you also realize that like every material thing of our company burnt, but we still had a company, we still had a business because it's beyond the material. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like the client's love for the libations and then us creating it. And we had all our formulas.
Your brand, you have a like a cult-like brand. You have celebrity followers. You're like featured in like Elle and Vogue and like huge publications. Like you can't burn that down.
Yeah, and so I was excited about that and to feel that like it really kind of is grounding, even though like it was sort of like air in that sense, but it was very good. And then just, the team really just showing up so good. So we built, so then 2016, we start building again. So that was 2013. Took a moment, get the new plan going, and then, having get the permits and everything. We did this really awesome build. It's won environmental awards. It's a lot of passive solar that we had, like, all like the plans went through the computer in Europe where they're looking at the charting the sun all day and all that sort of stuff. And like we can turn off the heat in the building in February, which is pretty cool because it retains its heat. But anyways, really fun too to design how we're going to make, because like I designed the architect around how we produce the products. So that was really cool to really finally architect a space to create the libations. And then that took like 2 years to build. So then we were ready. We moved in 2018 and we skipped the 10,000 square foot building stage. We went right to like 22. So, you know what I mean? We just skipped through stages. And then I was so glad that we had that gorgeous building, so much space for the pandemic, and that we weren't in the middle of a construction project that big in the middle, because that would not have been good, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So we've got this great space that we're creating in, and I think it really at this point it's just really about, oh, you're always refining systems, and then just I love keeping things agile and stable, especially just because it is a bit strange out there, but just to always create the stability and the consistency in beautiful libations.
Mm. I love that. I have one more question for you.
Mhm.
Because you mentioned the pandemic and um there's a lot of people right now that they feel this purpose within them. They have an idea. They would love to bring it to life, but they're looking around and they're like, I don't know, it's not a good time to start something like this. And I did a workshop recently about what businesses have done well during the hardest times of the planet, like World War One, World War Two, the Great Depression. Um, I'm curious as how did your business do during the pandemic as a quote unquote non-essential? Because in my studies of businesses that have thrived during challenging times, it's not who you think will come out on top. You know, during the Great Depression, that's when Monopoly boomed, the entertainment industry, Chanel lipstick, because yes, we have practical needs, but we also still have emotional needs. Um, how did your business do during challenging times? And what would you say to someone who was scared to start because they're looking at the world and are like, ah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. I also remember going through the like 1994 recession when I had my store in Toronto, and then the 208 crash of, whatever that was. And so, yeah, I feel like I've ridden through a few moments, and it does seem like in those times we're okay because that's what's needed, sort of those smaller items. And there is even a thing called, what is it, the lipstick factor. So it's funny you mentioned lipstick because, yeah, so when it's like the big ticket items go down, like washers, dryers, cars, but then the splurge could come with like getting that red lipstick, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So although I think in this current moment, it feels like it's been such a long, like a stretched out inflation recession, so I feel like it's affecting things, I think, a bit deeper right now. It's like slower but deeper in a way, like rather than a crash. And here we are, you know what I mean? And then the pandemic moment was we actually were quote unquote essential because we make soap and hand sanitizer.
Mm, smart.
And so you got to keep clean. And then, I mean, as one client said, it's hard enough living through a pandemic, but don't make me live through the pandemic without libations.
Mm,
So I feel like we were really for that moment because, even the healthy gumdrops, for example, is like medicinal and it's like immune enhancing. So like everything we make is really keeping you clean and working for you, not against you, so to speak. So I'd say for starting a business, I mean, really, there's no right time.
mm,
You can't time it with the rest of the world. And you want to be just so fortified within that, which I think is just a general plan. Like you don't want to be too swayed by what's external. And so keep finding your strength and your know-how and your intuition to go forward from inside.
mm. I love that. I think people maybe don't always understand what it takes. And they think if they hit struggle or a problem or their own resistance, it's a sign to stop. And, in my containers, I'm always just trying to encourage people like, you're going to hit that. You will
Oh
hit
yeah.
failure and problems and self-doubt. And the equation is consistency equals inevitable. Consistency
Yeah.
equals
Yeah.
inevitable. You just have to keep
Yeah.
going.
Absolutely. And I saw my friend speak. Her name's Amanda Chantel, and she owns Moon Juice, in case anybody knows her. But I guess she was on like a podcast about entrepreneurism, and she was like, and it takes naivety. And I was like, yeah, it does. Because if you like not knowing what's gonna happen, like, not knowing there's gonna be a fire is great. Because
Yeah.
if you knew, you'd just already be in bed. You'd just be
Yes.
like, we're done. Kind of like even having a kid, right? I mean, it's just amazing, and so much is amazing. But of course,
Yes.
you're going to hit those walls too.
You're
Like
right.
every,
It's so better that we don't actually know. If you had the crystal ball with what you were in for with children, like,
yes.
I don't know. Sorry, I have this fly in here that's buzzing
Oh,
around
yeah,
my
have a wasp. That's okay.
um Nadine, where can people find you? I know I've been making my own personal shopping list this entire episode. I'm gonna head over to your website right after this. If people want to learn about your work, if they want to find your beautiful libations, Renegade Beauty, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, well, livinglibations.com has all of our things. And the books are there too. There's Audible versions on Audible. You can also get the books, of course, like Amazon and stuff. And then, so it's livinglibations.com. And then there's like Instagram. We have Living Libations and Nadine Artemis, all the regular channels, so to speak. There's a lot of articles on our site as well. So that could be if you don't want to buy the book, just dive in there.
I think book in hand. Like this is like such a cool like beauty Bible. It's so beautiful. I don't know. I feel like I'm constantly like returning to different chapters. So if anyone's listening, like get the physical thing in hand. I think it's really cool.
There's a really strong dental chapter in there as well. So like there's a lot in there and you might not have to buy the dental book. If you just
Mm.
start with the Renegade Beauty, it could fulfill all your needs. And yeah, it really is a reference that you could just have for years.
I love it. Well, thank you for your time here today. I love your work. I love your potions. And yeah, I'm going shopping today. You just reminded me about all the things.
Woo! It's been such a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you, Nadine. I'll make sure everything is linked in the show notes for our listeners. And yeah, just looking forward to connecting here again soon one day.
Awesome. Take care.
Been underground, now I aim for the sky. Don't quit now, you can last longer. All these wounds only making you stronger. Don't